Hi, everybody. Sorry. Welcome. Well, today is our first meeting for the Denver Natural Medicine Group. So thank you all for being here. I'm Molly Duplashane. I am the Executive Director for Denver's Department of Excise and Licenses. For those of you who aren't familiar with our department, we are the department in Denver that issues all the business and occupational licenses, and we enforce all the licensing laws and regulations for the city of Denver. We regulate businesses in Denver whose activities present any type of public health or safety risk. We have more than 100 types of business licenses. Some of those include marijuana, short-term rentals, residential rentals, all liquor licenses, restaurants, security guards, and many more. So sometimes that means as new industries or new business models are created or are being developed, we evaluate whether it is a license that needs to be established here in Denver. And so with the recent legislation of natural medicine at the state level and the ballot measure that was passed by voters a couple of years ago, we want to explore whether that is something that as it starts to happen here in Denver, is it something that we should establish a regulatory framework for? And if so, what would that look like? So that's what we're gathered here today to start doing with all of you. Really, the purpose of this work group is to gather your input and your feedback as we explore and develop what that necessary framework might look like. What we want to make sure we're doing is really gathering that input and feedback as we look at this being created in Denver. We really want to make sure we're not re-legislating whether this, natural medicine or the validity of natural medicine, but really just as this is starting to, these businesses are starting to operate in Denver, what could that look like? And what are some regulations that might be important for us to consider? Abby and Erica will go through this a little bit more, but we'll take all of this information and the recommendation, develop some recommendations that we'll take forward later on this year to the mayor and city council eventually, if regulations are needed to be developed. Just wanted to mention that we did have a lot of interest in this work group. We received over 200 applications in just under 2 weeks. We appreciate all of the panelists who have agreed to serve in this capacity, and we appreciate everybody who expressed interest to serve on the work group. The ones that we selected to be on the work group, we selected because we feel like you represent really a broad array of interests and have the experience and expertise to comment on the specific policy questions that we'll be discussing. We also just wanted to make sure that we limited the size of the work group so that we can encourage or promote and allow for really a constructive and productive and dynamic dialogue and to have that exchange of ideas. So just wanted to mention for those that were not selected to be on the work group, there are still plenty of ways to engage in the process and want to encourage you to do so. At the end of every single meeting, we'll have a public comment period. And we review or we listen to those just as closely as we do to the discussion that happens throughout the work group. And then there's also an opportunity to submit written comments. And again, we read through every one of those and put just as much value into those as well. Really, we want to make sure we hear a variety of different perspectives and receive all the important feedback from the members and non-members of the group. We know we have a lot to learn, and we're excited to jump into this process and hear from all of you, both work group members and non-work group members. We really do put a lot of value into this part of the process. We strongly believe that we couldn't just go create some natural medicine regulations without the input from our important stakeholders. So really want to thank you, but also just let you know how important it is for us in this process. We also are going to start each meeting with a land acknowledgement, so I will do that now. The Department of Excise and Licenses would like to honor and acknowledge that the land on which we live and work is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples, as well as being historically tied to at least 48 contemporary tribal nations. We honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were built on and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. As individuals and as an office, we are committed to working to dismantling ongoing systems and legacies of oppression and inequity. and we value the historical, current, and future contributions of Indigenous communities in Denver. Just two more quick things before we jump in. I just wanted to mention that as a part of the recruitment for the work group, we did receive some interest from individuals who are seeking medical health treatment through natural medicine. And so we just wanted to share a resource for anybody that is experiencing a mental health crisis and needs assistance. You can text or call 988 for help. And then finally, I just wanted to make sure that I recognize and thank the city staff that helped to get today organized and that will help keep us on track over the next few months. A huge thanks to Abby Soyson, Erica Rogers, and Nicole Kim. It takes a lot of time to make sure that we hold these meetings in a way that we can be productive and get value out of them and find them informative. So huge kudos to them for keeping us on track and all the work that goes into that. So I will now turn it over to Abby and she'll go through some meeting logistics and we'll jump into introductions for everybody.
Great. Thank you, Molly. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Soyson. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Department of Excise and Licenses in the city of Denver. Here's a quick agenda for today. Molly has spoken and given her remarks. I'll go through some meeting logistics quickly, just some housekeeping notes, and then we're going to dive into work group member introductions. We want to get to know each of you individually and allow you a chance to get to know each other. And then we'll talk through the purpose and the role of this work group and some guiding principles. And then we have our friends from the Colorado Division of Natural Medicine here to give a high-level overview of the state law. And then we will give a little bit more information and background about the city's role in that process. And then we will launch into a guided discussion. And we've asked you all to sort of prepare some thoughts for that discussion. So we're excited to hear from you all. And then at the end of the meeting, we're just going to save about 15 minutes to hear from any members of the public who are attending the meeting today who would like to share a public comment. So a few housekeeping notes. This is a webinar style Zoom meeting. That means that the meeting participants with video and audio capabilities are members of the Natural Medicine Work Group. And then attendees who are not work group members do not have video or audio capabilities, but they are able to watch the meeting. If you are a member of the public who's attending the meeting, we're excited to have you here. And if you would like to make a public comment at the end of the meeting, we'll have you raise your hand and I'll call on you and enable you to unmute yourself and speak to give your public comment. We'll go over more detailed instructions about that when the public comment period begins. For members of the work group, please check what your name appears as on your screen. If needed, please update it to your name and any preferred pronouns if you would like to. And you can do that by clicking on, by hovering over your video and clicking on those three buttons in the top right-hand corner. Please stay muted unless you are speaking. This just minimizes interruptions and background noise. If there's background noise coming from you, I might mute you, so please don't be offended, but we just want to make sure everyone can hear. If you are comfortable doing so, we do encourage you to have your camera on. Being on camera promotes a more fluid and respectful dialogue, allows others to pick up on nonverbal cues, and it allows those who may be hard of hearing to read your lips. Particularly during the introductions portion of the meeting, we want to be able to put faces to names and get to know you all. And during the discussion portion, please feel free to turn off your camera during the presentation portions of the meeting if you'd like. You don't have to raise your hand to speak. We want to have kind of a fluid and casual dialogue, but if you're having trouble getting a word in, or if you're just more comfortable raising your hand to contribute, please feel free to click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen and we'll cue you to speak. As work group members, you are able to send direct messages to one another and to the group, not to members of the public. Please note that the chats are saved and they're part of the record. And we ask that you kind of limit use of the chat just because it can be a little bit distracting. Finally, the Q&A is enabled for the public to be able to ask questions throughout the meeting. Erica will track and respond to questions as needed. So panel members, you don't need to worry about the Q&A or be distracted by it. And if we don't get to any of those questions during the meeting, we will Consider them for future agenda topics or put together an FAQ for our website. Okay.
Hey, Abby, real quick. I'm getting Shane let me know his audio is coming off kind of with lots of feedback. I just wanted to check in to see if anybody else is having that issue, or maybe Shane just needs to do a restart or something. Anybody else, can you just maybe raise your hand, or if you're having audio issues, if it's coming across, and we can put something, I guess, in the chat to see too. So, but okay, Shane's going to try logging out and coming back in. So, okay, we can go ahead and keep going. Thanks.
All right. So now we're going to dive into introductions. I'm going to start with all of our city and state staff who are here supporting the work of this work group. If you can just share your name, share the department that you're with, and then just a quick summary of your interest in natural medicine or the expertise that you'll be bringing to this group so people can get to know you. We'll start with Erica Rogers, since Molly's already introduced herself, and then we'll go to Tina since I've introduced myself. So Erica, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Rogers. I'm the policy director here in Excise and Licenses. You heard from Molly what our department does. My team and the policy team, we work on legislative matters and everything from state law feedback to local ordinance development and upkeep, as well as local agency rules and regulations and agency policies that guide our work when it comes to licensing. So happy to be here, happy to learn, excited to hear from you all. I'll kick it to Tina.
You are muted, Tina.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Axelrad. I work for the city's Department of Community Planning and Development, and my interest here is primarily when policy decisions are being made and there's any discussion of the location of any future commercial enterprises that might invoke application of zoning or building code rules. I'm your technical resource on that. So glad to be here. I'll kick it over to Abby.
Good afternoon. My name is Abby Davidson. I'm the program manager of the Food and Cannabis program here at the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. Our teams conduct regulatory inspections of food facilities, cannabis facilities, other regulated industries. And so my interest in being a part of this is to learn, listen and learn, provide input from a public health perspective if needed, and possibly our team would receive concerns and complaints in the future. So happy to be here.
Okay. Thanks, Abby. Unfortunately, Jason Kramer, our senior assistant city attorney, was not able to join us today. He's in court. So I will skip to Ariana.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had to dial in, but my name is Ariana Orozco. I am a strategist and trainer with the Mayor's Office of Social Equity and Innovation. I'm really happy to be part of this group, and I hope to bring an equity lens to the conversations that we will be having.
Great, thank you. Lieutenant Rivas. Lieutenant Rivas may not be here yet, but he is with the fire department, so he'll bring that perspective to the group. Sergeant Michael. Sergeant Michael, are you with us? I see you on the list, but you might be muted. Okay, we'll come back. And then I want to ask our friends from the state to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Dominique.
Great, thank you, Abby. My name is Dominica Mediola, and I am the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's new Natural Medicine Division that we are standing up, as well as our Marijuana Enforcement Division. I've been with the department for about 10 years now, and one key area that is so important to our work has been our engagement with stakeholders when it comes to standing up new regulatory programs, recognizing there are some big distinctions between this and our cannabis program in the state. So excited to be here and learn from folks. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominique. Allison, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Abby, and all the Denver City staff. Good afternoon, all. My name is Allison Robinette. I serve as the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs at the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. Looking forward to hearing your conversation throughout these meetings.
Great, thank you. And Amelia, do you want to go ahead?
Hey everybody, Amelia Myers, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Policy Advisor here at the Division of Natural Medicine, and I just started, so I'm looking forward to learning from all the experts out here in the crowd, as well as the stakeholders at the state level in forming this new regulatory program that we're all venturing into together. Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you. And then I'll just do one more call out for Lieutenant Rivas or Sergeant Michael, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Sergeant Michael is with the Denver Police Department, so we have a good public safety. They are represented here, even if they have not been able to introduce themselves yet. All right, now I'd like to dive into introductions of our work group members. I'm going to go in order of this list, so you will know if you're coming up next. And we'll start with Tom Allen.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, afternoon. Long day for me. My name is Thomas Allen. I am a commissioner on the Denver American Indian Commission. I'm also born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. My affiliation is to my community, which is the American Indians in the greater Denver area. I am Northern Arapaho, Sac and Fox, and Yuchi. I'm also grateful to be here today to give input on this great subject, new and innovative.
Thank you. Michael?
Hi, thanks so much. Very excited to be here. My name is Michael Briggs. I've been a Denver resident for the last about 20 years. I received my bachelor's and master's from the University of Denver. I spent the last decade working in IT security and decided to make a little bit of a career shift. So I'm now the president of Spiritus Oregon. We are an Oregon psilocybin manufacturer. What that means is we perform cultivation, extraction, and edible creation. And am also looking to begin operations here in Colorado once the regulations have been fully implemented.
Great, thank you. Bia?
Hi, Bia Campbell. I'm with VS Strategies. We're a policy and government affairs firm. We're representing clients that wish to procure a license. We've been working for the past 2 years, both on Proposition 122 as well as 290, which implemented at the legislative level the natural medicine program. And we've been also working very closely with the NMED with the regulatory framework for the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Kemi R. I'm sorry if I said that wrong.
Hi, I'm Kami R. Coffee. My partners and I are interested in licensing around health centers and opening one in the coming years. My background is in healthcare software, so I'm also specifically interested in some of the requirements around patient data and reporting, and also expanding access in these centers for people with disabilities. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. Marcy?
Hi, my name is Marcy Cooper. I am a hospice and palliative care nurse here in the Denver metro area. I also represent Cannabis Nurses Network, and I'm the education director, and I'm representing nurses and patients, largely patients who are homebound, hospice, palliative care, a multitude of other patients who may not have access based on the way some of the rules and regulations look like they are going to be written now. So I'm very grateful to be here and support this.
Great, thank you. Gabriella?
Hello, my name is Gabriella, and please forgive me, I'm in another meeting. I'm trying to be here as present. I am an Indigenous community member. I have been working with my communities here locally who are also connected to different nations across the nation. I do not represent all Indigenous people or all medicines in this bill, but I do have the consent from my communities to represent our needs as we're the most impacted people in this bill and this implementation.
Wonderful, thank you. Carissa?
Good afternoon. I'm Carissa Garcia. I am an Indigenous Pueblo person, born and raised in Colorado. I am primarily interested in prioritizing equity provisions in the implementation of licensing, programming, and cumulative impacts, including environmental impacts on disproportionately impacted communities in the Denver metro area.
Great, thank you. Councilman Hines?
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Hines. I serve on Denver City Council representing the Center City District. I'm also the first elected official in Denver's history, local, state, or federal, who uses a wheelchair to get around, and the first who identifies as a member of the disability community. And I have been interested in psilocybin because of the transformative effects that cannabis has for people with disabilities. And so I did sit on the Denver psilocybin review panel after psilocybin passed here in May 7th of 2019. And so that's a bit about why I'm here and why I'm interested in being on the panel. And of course, if we do create something here, or if the recommendation is to create something, it might go through City Council. So certainly paying attention from the policy perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Shane?
Hi, my name is Shane Lamaster. I'm very humbled and honored to be here today. I am a mental health therapist in private practice now for 15 years. Been a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist for 4 years now. And I have also served as vice president on the Denver Psilocybin Policy Review Panel when that was first initiated, and then reassigned the same position a second time around before it was disbanded. Currently working on a PhD in social work up at Colorado State University, where my research interests are on psilocybin and their effects on chronic pain. So I am both in the research side of this as well as the practice side. And I'm here to represent other mental health therapists and current practitioners in this area, in this space, so that there can be some protections for currently practicing folks as well.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Lewis?
Hi, everyone. My name is Councilwoman Chantel Lewis, and I'm just really excited to be here, learn more, hear from the experts, and contribute as I'm able to. Thank you.
Jacob?
Hey all, I'm Jacob Marlega. I own and operate a gourmet mushroom farm in Denver, Colorado, and I'm just interested in being in the group because I think my expertise in growing could assist the policy and licensing development.
Thank you. Valeria?
Hi, everyone. I'm Valeria Martinez. I own a holistic retreat company. I facilitate in Denver and internationally as well. Some of my retreats do include the use of psilocybin in a ceremonial context. I have been in relationship with the Niños Santos for about 5 years and have been facilitating for almost 3 years. And as a practitioner, I am the first to say that I still have so much to learn about how to be in reciprocity with the medicine and reciprocity with the indigenous cultures of this medicine. This medicine is not a pharmaceutical, it is a living, breathing spirit. And so I want to make sure that we honor the medicine and also include the indigenous perspectives in every part of implementation to really live in reciprocity and honor these cultures. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kevin?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Matthews, and I've been working in psychedelic policy reform now for the past 6 years. I led the campaign Decriminalize Denver, Initiative 301, that had Denver be the first city in the U.S. to decriminalize the personal possession and use of psilocybin mushrooms. I also served as the co-chief proponent and the coalition director for the Natural Medicine Health Act, also known as Proposition 122, and then was also the president of the Denver Psilocybin Mushroom Policy Review Panel. And now I consult broadly in the space across the psychedelic ecosystem here in the US. And I'm mainly honored to be a part of this group to help ensure that Denver continues to be the national leader in this conversation of implementing psychedelic policy, and to do the best we can to make sure that it is as accessible as possible to as many of the folks who could possibly benefit from these medicines. Thank you.
Thank you. Noah?
Hi, I'm Noah Novello. I'm the founder and lead scientist of Friday Ventures here in Colorado, which offers potency and microbial testing, consulting, and personal use education for cannabis and psychedelics. After a severe back injury in 2011, I became a medical cannabis refugee when I moved to Colorado for safe and legal access to this healing plant. Within a week of obtaining my medical card, I went from 20 pills a day to 0, and my quality of life improved drastically. The expertise I'm bringing to the discussion comes from a background in neuropsychopharmacology, plus 11 years of hands-on experience in every step of a vertically integrated operation that uses plants to create consistent, effective, affordable, regulated medicine. Throughout the past year, I've analyzed hundreds of local natural medicine products and plan to contribute what I've learned about safety, compliance, dosage, product development, and public health in hopes of an innovative program that will help people heal and grow. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ray?
Hi, I'm Ray Radke. I'm a third-generation mycologist and a fungal geneticist. I work in agricultural restoration as well as ancient forestry restoration and preservation. I also work in psilocybin mycelial research, and I work in the crossroads between a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists, as well as individuals who cultivate in the metaphysical space, and I consult in that area.
Great, thank you. Hope?
My name is Hope Sievers. I'm a mom of 4 adult children. I'm an entrepreneur, and I am the director of customer experience for Epiphany Mushroom Company out of Akron, Ohio. We specialize in functional and gourmet mushrooms. And in addition to our work in Ohio, we plan to open licensed healing centers in Colorado once the program launches. I have a master's degree in professional counseling, and I'm currently in Vital Psychedelic Informed Practitioner Training Program. Upon graduation, I plan to serve as a facilitator for Epiphany's healing centers. Holistic wellness and natural medicines have been woven into my personal and professional ethos for more than 20 years. What we consume physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually matters. My intention here is to hold the delicate space between the therapeutic model and spirituality. Thank you.
Thank you. Nico?
Hi, my name is Nico Stubaski. I am with Althea Public Benefit Corporation. We're a collaboration with Anschutz and the Psychedelic Public Policy Partnership and Department of Psychiatry. My background is in healthcare technology, and am particularly interested in the intricacies of rolling out this program in Colorado and beyond, and how software might help with the facilitation of that, reducing costs, increasing access, and improving access to knowledge as we figure out what happens when we introduce psychedelics to society at large. Thank you.
Brandon?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Sklar, and I'm a psychiatrist who lives in Denver. My interest in natural medicine policy comes from a deeply personal place. These medicines have helped me heal from significant childhood trauma, and in doing so, saved my life. I feel profound reverence, respect, and gratitude for them, and I want to help promote their integration into our society and my own professional sphere. I come from a scientific background, and during my training, I became frustrated with how the scientific community was treating natural medicines and other communities that are more experienced with them. Likewise, I was also noticing how even the well-meaning parts of the scientific community were often wholesale dismissed by natural medicine advocates. I really think these policies we will be discussing come at a crossroads between a lot of different cultures and perspectives, and I hope to be able to lend my expertise and experience to help bridge the gaps between them and foster collaboration. I'm really looking forward to working with you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Dale?
Brandon, good to see you again. My name is Dale Terasaki. I'm a medical doctor at Denver Health, and that is the city's safety net institution, which has a huge stake in both the potential therapeutic benefits of natural medicines as well as potentially the unanticipated harms. I also work in research, and I conducted a clinical trial that included ketamine therapy for alcohol use disorder. So I'm very interested in this topic more broadly. And I attended the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference this past year, as well as I got a paper published in Psychedelic Medicine Journal. And so I'm here representing Denver Health. I'm also representing Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Services, RMPDS, who is actively developing tools to monitor some of the impacts of these changes.
Great, thank you. Tristan?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the time. My name is Tristan Watkins. My background, I actually have a doctorate in neuroscience, and among other things, did study MDMA in cannabis, which led me to a few steps removed the current role that I'm in, which is with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, where I really help build out the Cannabis Business Office, which is a specific equity focus for economic development within the cannabis industry in particular. And I imagine that, that will be the largest role that I play, will be sort of patterning off of the experience from that and how we can implement something similar within the potential Denver psychedelic industry as well. Thank you.
Susan? Susan Weinstein?
Hi, my name is Susan Weinstein. I'm an LCSW, and I've been practicing in Denver on and off for over 25 years. I've also done international humanitarian work and with refugees around the globe. My interest in natural medicine is kind of broad. As a mental health practitioner with a private practice currently, and the humanitarian work I've done, I've been exposed to all sorts of trauma all around the globe with different populations in different countries, and very excited that we're trying to work on this here. My goal as a therapist is to help expand access for mental health treatment, and like Brandon, myself have been treated with it and have found it life-changing. And so as a psychedelic assisted therapist who've been practicing for 10 years with different variations of medications and medicines, I want to help and learn and offer whatever guidance I can and continue to expand access.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for taking the time to share a little bit about yourself. I think I speak for all of us on our team when I say that I'm just blown away by the expertise that we have here on this call, and really excited to learn from you all and continue to get to know you. So I'm going to pass it over to Erica to just talk a little bit about the purpose and the role of this group and some guiding principles.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you, Abby. I second her comments about being excited to hear from all of you, just even from your brief introductions and having read all of your applications. I can tell that the wealth of knowledge is just beyond my comprehension. So to kick us off, this may be your first time on an excise and licenses work group, or maybe even just your first time on a work group in general. So we wanted to provide a primer on the purpose and role of this particular work group, just so everyone's on the same page and knows what to expect. And we're all sort of operating on the same ground rules. So the purpose of this natural medicine work group is to provide suggestions and feedback on whether and how the city here in Denver should license and or regulate natural medicine businesses, or, for lack of a better word, right? I know we're operating in a space where commercialization is a concern. So when we're looking at these brick and mortar establishments, we will refer to them as businesses with that caveat in mind. So a few things to keep in mind. As Molly mentioned, we're not here to re-legislate state law. So we're at the city level. We do not have the authority to change anything at the state level. We also won't be able to provide a liaison for weighing in on the state rulemaking, which is a separate process that is also happening right now. Our members at the state will talk a little bit about that here in just a second, but on this group, we probably won't be focusing too much on that state level regulation because that's just out of our jurisdiction. So that's number one. Number two is that this group is advisory in nature. So what that means is we're not going to vote on any issues or positions. We're not even here with a goal of reaching consensus on any recommendations. We are here to listen to everyone. And we understand that there may be disagreements and different work group members may have different perspectives and ideas, and we want to hear all of those, right? If you'd like to provide additional information after the work group meeting in writing to support, comments, we also welcome those. So don't feel like this group has to come to any consensus. We are here to listen and hear everything that you have to say that could help us in this endeavor. In that vein, each member is an equal participant and has an equal opportunity to voice their opinions and contribute their ideas. So we will be trying to, if we haven't heard from you, we may call on you. If you don't have anything on that particular issue, that's totally fine. But we will be just trying to make sure we hear from everybody because you all bring so much to the table. The last thing, and this is important, I think, too, especially for our community members who are listening in, or if you are listening in, maybe you applied and you weren't selected for the work group. We are going to consider everything we hear in these meetings from this group, in the public comments, and then we'll work on synthesizing all of that into some recommendations for the mayor and for our city council folks. Obviously, we have 2 city council member representatives who we're grateful are here that can, bear firsthand witness to the conversations, and they can keep us honest if we come to city council with something that doesn't sound like it jives with what we heard. So this is a public process. We encourage everyone to provide as much public input as you would like in writing, in the public comment sections, all of that. That's kind of the green phase. Like I said, we'll develop those recommendations. That's that yellow piece in the middle. And then any city council process, I want to remind folks, is a secondary or not secondary, but it comes second to this process. This will be first and that will be second, but that is a whole other public process. And there will be additional avenues for public comment and weighing in with your city council representatives. And nothing will be decided until and unless city council, who represent the citizens and residents of Denver, decide that that is the way it will be. So I just wanted to make that clear so that everyone's operating on the same standards. That said, on our excise and license work groups, we have a couple of guiding principles that we just like to share with you all. This helps us when we are doing things where we're not looking for consensus. We still want to be respectful, right? So these are our guiding principles here that we'll employ at all of our work group sessions. The first being that work group members agree to value the expertise and unique perspectives of all the other work group members. They also agree to recognize the legitimacy of the interests, concerns, and goals of others, whether or not they agree. And then finally, work group members agree to treat each other and all meeting attendees with respect, civility, and courtesy. So if you have any qualms, please see me afterward, but no, I'm teasing. And before we hand it over to Allison Robinette with the state, I just want to go over a brief timeline for anyone listening, just to kind of, again, differentiate between kind of the state level and local level and the different things that we're concerned about. So some of you, especially those who are Denver residents here, will know that in 2019, Denver voters approved initiated Ordinance 301. That was the Denver Psilocybin Mushroom Initiative. It's linked here in the slides if you want to dig into the nitty gritty, into the ordinance language. It did deprioritize the criminal enforcement of personal use and personal possession of psilocybin mushrooms by those who are 21 and older. As a part of that ballot initiative, there was the Denver Psilocybin Mushroom Policy Review Panel, which I think several of our work group members have served on and or are familiar with. And so they did release a report in 2021 towards the end of the year. It's a pretty interesting report. It has a lot of data and information. It provided a survey at the time of what other states were doing. If you haven't read it, it's about 50 pages, but it's pretty interesting. We've got that linked as well. The next milestones are all at the state level, and Allison will talk more about those. But in 2022, Colorado voters approved Prop 122, which is the initial access to natural psychedelic substances. The next year in 2023, the state legislature passed a bill amending the regulatory framework. And in this year, the Department of Revenue and Department of Regulatory agencies are working on their rulemaking so that they can offer those licenses required by the state law by the end of the year. So with that kind of overview, I will hand it over to Allison Robinette with the Division of Natural Medicine.
Hey, Erica, this is Dominique Mendiola with the Division of Natural Medicine. I know Allison is setting up our presentation slide deck, so while she's doing that, I'll just kick us off. And Allison and I will be presenting together here. Again, I'm Dominique Mendiola, the Senior Director for the Natural Medicine Division, as well as our Marijuana Enforcement Division. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Allison Robinette on our team, who serves as our Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for both divisions within the Department of Revenue, as well as you heard in the introductions, my colleague Amelia Myers, who is our Senior Policy Advisor for the Natural Medicine Division. And Amelia is our very first full-time staff member within this new division. So as I see our presentation is up, first, thank you to our partners in Denver for inviting us to be here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing at the state level as it relates to regulated natural medicine. We will be tracking the work of our local partners and what they're engaging in so we can understand how it informs things like potential time, place, and manner expectations set at the local level, for example, as it relates to zoning requirements or restrictions. Before we hit on some of the implementation work that we're doing within the Department of Revenue, we really want to focus most of our presentation on providing some background and an overview of what the new state law provides around natural medicine in Colorado. I'm going to hand it over to Allison to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. And again, good to be with all of you this afternoon. So just as you heard Erica discussing, we're going to start with Proposition 122, which, as you all know, passed in November of 2022 as the Natural Medicine Health Act. And this proposition really did two significant things. It directed the establishment of the regulatory program for access to natural medicine, and it established personal use and sharing allowances for adults. The proposition assigned the Department of Regulatory agencies with all regulatory responsibilities, and then it also established the Natural Medicine Advisory Board, which our partners at DORA facilitate, and that board had the authority under Proposition 122 to establish regulations for that regulatory program. Finally, the proposition defined natural medicine to include psilocybin and psilocin, ibogaine, dimethyltryptamine or DMT, and mescaline, but importantly, excluding peyote. And regarding the categories of natural medicine, the regulatory program has a narrower scope from the start. So when we're talking about natural medicine for the state regulatory program, we are really talking about that being focused on psilocybin and psilocin. And so following Prop 122, we saw the passage of Senate Bill 290, and this is where we at the Department of Revenue come in.
Great, thanks, Allison. And so just continuing forward, and I think Erica's slide before we pulled ours up just sort of primed this nicely for us already, is under Proposition 122 and now Senate Bill 290. There are really two main aspects to the changes in the law. First, as it relates to personal use. The law allows the personal use of natural medicine for adults. This includes allowances for personal cultivation and possession. Specifically for personal cultivation, adults can cultivate natural medicine on private property. That is further defined in statute. That area, for example, must be enclosed and locked and cannot exceed 12 by 12 feet. And also for personal possession and use, there is no personal possession limit in the law. And adults age 21 and up are allowed to share natural medicine with other adults for reasons that are listed in statute. For example, sharing can occur within the context of spiritual guidance and community-based use. There are also restrictions or prohibitions around personal use. And some examples there include when sharing, you cannot accept payment for natural medicine. As we've stated, this is not a commercial program, so you will not see dispensaries for natural medicine like we have for cannabis here in Colorado. And then second, separate from those personal use allowances, the law directs the state to stand up a regulatory program for natural medicine. Just starting with local jurisdiction involvement, unlike retail marijuana or adult use marijuana laws here in Colorado, the Natural Medicine Code does not expressly establish a dual licensing framework. Rather, the law provides that local jurisdictions may enact ordinances or regulations governing time, place, manner, and operation of licenses. However, the law also provides that those ordinances or regulations may not be so restrictive as to effectively prohibit the operation of a natural medicine facility. The law also directs the Department of Regulatory Agencies, so these are our state partners in DORA, as we often refer to them as, so the Department of Regulatory Agencies, to license and regulate facilitators. And those are persons who are approved by the state to administer natural medicine to adults in a regulated environment. And then when it comes to our agency, the Department of Revenue, the law directs the Department of Revenue to license and regulate healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and laboratory testing facilities for regulated natural medicine. Also, the Natural Medicine Division was established as a cash-funded agency, and this is similar to how we operate the Marijuana Enforcement Division at the state. Ultimately, this means that our operations are expected to be sustained by application and license fees. Other responsibilities assigned to the Department of Revenue by Senate Bill 290 include data collection and reporting, public education, and coordinating with first responders across the state to support any training needs, development of materials around training, for example. So that's just to name a few of those other responsibilities we have. We'd also, just with the time we have left, would like to touch on some of the implementation work that we've engaged in so far at the state level. So Allison's going to take us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique. And I'll quickly just show this slide because I forgot to move it forward while Dominique was speaking. So apologies, everyone, for that. But when we're talking about what we've done so far, similar to what you heard from our colleagues at the City of Denver, we've been engaged in a lot of information gathering over the last several months since Department of Revenue was brought into the fold of establishing this regulatory program. And this included holding 11 listening sessions spanning from September all the way through this month, March, just a few weeks ago. And as you can see, we've covered a number of different topics in these listening sessions that includes focusing on some of our responsibilities laid out in Senate Bill 290, such as data collection, or education campaign materials, but we've also spent a lot of time focusing on those mandatory areas of rulemaking that we are tasked by the General Assembly of establishing through the regulatory program. So that includes, for example, licensing, and what does licensing for businesses and facilities look like? All of those recordings are available on our website, as well as agendas, shared resources that we've collected during these information gathering listening sessions. We also just kicked off our formal rulemaking process, and this will consist of at least 8 formal work group meetings where we are presenting draft rules. And the purpose of our rulemaking is to collaborate with stakeholders, as you're hearing from all kinds of folks today, in establishing the regulatory framework for natural medicine operations that will be regulated by the Department of Revenue. So again, that includes healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and laboratory testing facilities. Our first session was on March 20th, earlier this month, and focused on licensing, where we presented initial draft rules to solicit input from anyone in attendance who had interest in providing comments or asking questions. And like we saw in our listening sessions, we had a lot of really great feedback and suggestions that will inform our continued development of proposed rules. And as you can see on our schedule, our next meeting is scheduled for April 10th. All of these meetings are open to the public. Most of the time is spent in comments. So we present what rules we have drafted and continue to develop, as well as sort of the intent and reasoning behind why we are proposing the rule that we are, and then opening it up to members of the public to provide us their feedback. Our goal is to have final rules adopted by mid-August in order to provide time for interested parties to begin preparing their applications and for us to support folks navigating that process. Also, in many of our meetings, we offer a virtual attendance option as well as an in-person attendance option. So please take a look at the schedule and as well as our website for information about how you can join those meetings in addition to these work group meetings. And as it relates to our development of educational materials, did want to share that on our website, you will find a recently published Know the Law resource that is a place to start for anyone who's interested in just spreading general awareness about the changes under Senate Bill 23-290. And we will be continuing to build on this work with additional resources in the coming months and years. Again, all of this information is available on our website, as well as details about our future meetings and how to join those meetings. If you have not already, there's an opportunity on our homepage to sign up for notifications from our team. So I understand we have some time to answer any questions from work group members, and so I'll defer to Abby and Erica how best to facilitate that.
Sure, if anybody has questions, feel free to chime in, or if you are more comfortable raising your hand, feel free to do that and I'll call on you.
So it seems like there's multiple work groups, committees. How does this work group relate to the other ones already, doing things?
That's a great question. This work group is focused on Denver and focused on whether and how we should license natural medicine facilities locally. So whether we should require an additional local license on top of what will be required by the state, and whether there need to be specific Denver regulations for natural medicine businesses. So this group is very much focused on Denver while keeping an eye on all the things the state is doing.
Related to that question, has there been other jurisdictions that have created groups like this?
That's a great question. Not that I'm aware of in Colorado. I don't know, Dominique or Allison, if you're aware of any in Colorado.
I'm not aware of any other formal work groups that other municipalities or local jurisdictions have formed yet, though I know that a lot of jurisdictions are starting to have these conversations.
Hey, and thanks, Allison and Abby. Also just wanted to add that a part of our outreach across the state that included some of those listening sessions that we engaged in involved our partnering with some local jurisdictions as a part of like a town hall type format where we just wanted to invite the public. So it wasn't something that our local partner had created in a work group format similar to what our partners at Denver are doing. But we some of that outreach and engagement that we've done includes us really traveling to different parts of the state so that we can come to where people are at and engage with other members of the community and share about the work we're doing.
And just one quick addition, I think it's helpful. I think it was slide 4 in the slides that the state that Dominique and Allison just presented around what local authority was given in Senate Bill 290. I mean, it's pretty specific to time, place, and manner. And so those will really be the provisions that we're talking about when we're thinking about what licensing could look like here in Denver. Although I think we do want to have some conversations around, are there any other type of programmatic pieces we should be considering too around education, consumer awareness, those types of things as well. But from the licensing perspective, it's that time, place, and manner.
And I see Gabriella has her hand raised. Go ahead, Gabriella.
Yes, so I know there's it's a mouthful, federally recognized and Indigenous Community Working Group that's going to be advising the DORA board. How will the recommendations from that group that I know is still information, how is it going to impact, or how will Denver take the recommendations of the Indigenous Working Board and the DORA board as well?
That's a good question. It's hard to say right now without really knowing, what those look like yet. I will say that we are not focused in Denver on licensing facilitators, so that will be left to DORA to license and regulate facilitators themselves. But of course, we'll be paying attention to that process and paying attention to that working group and the recommendations that they come out with. And I think we want to certainly keep an eye towards Indigenous and American tribes and how those incorporate into the structure that we may have here locally. So we're certainly paying a lot of attention to those state working groups and state processes so that they can inform our recommendations here in Denver.
Thank you. I just, as part of a member of those communities, I just kind of want to keep planting the seed that the needs of these communities, since they're most impacted, are centered and our leadership really followed.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions? Okay. We have a couple more slides. I'll go quickly, and then we're going to dive into our discussion for the remainder of the meeting. Let me share really quickly. Okay. Oh, I don't think that worked. Share. There we go. So Allison and Dominique touched on this, but want to reiterate that our local authority in Denver is to govern time, place, manner, and operation of natural medicine facilities and businesses. We are not talking about whether or not to allow them. There will be natural medicine facilities and businesses in Denver. What we'll be talking about is whether we require them to have an additional local license and what the time, place, and manner and operations of those businesses look like in Denver. Local governments can't prohibit the establishment of natural medicine licenses. We can't prohibit the transportation of natural medicine on public roads by licensed persons, and we can't adopt ordinances or regulations that are unreasonable or in conflict with state law. I also just want to give everyone a little bit of background about what it means to have a business license in Denver. So the city of Denver only requires a business license for businesses that may have impacts on public health, public safety, or community welfare. So we don't require a business license for things like bookstores or clothing stores. The types of businesses that we do license include liquor businesses, marijuana businesses, tobacco retailers. We also license massage businesses because they have a particular public safety concern related to human trafficking. We license childcare establishments because we want to make sure that children are protected. We license body art businesses, which is tattoo parlors and other types of body art. We also license short-term rentals, so like Airbnbs, and residential rentals, so like apartment buildings. And that's just a handful of the licenses that we issue. We issue lots of different types of licenses, but only if there is some sort of public health or public safety risk that we are looking to mitigate. At a high level, the licensing process begins when an applicant submits a license application to the Department of Excise and Licenses at the City of Denver. We review the application, we schedule a public hearing if it's required by that license, and then we assign different departments to do inspections on the premises. And so different departments like the fire department or the health department will inspect the premises to assess compliance with local codes and laws. And then once all those inspections and hearing requirements are passed, Excise and Licenses issues the license. Once that license is issued, city agencies perform inspections on a regular basis. We investigate compliance concerns, and then when it's necessary, we take disciplinary action against the license if they have violated some code or ordinance. So that's at a high level what business licensing looks like in Denver, just so that you all have the context for what that would mean for natural medicine businesses. Okay, thank you all so much for your patience. I know we went through a lot of background information, but I think it's important for everyone to be on the same page about the purpose of this group and where we are in this process. We asked you all to kind of think ahead of time about what your top priorities and questions and concerns are related to how natural medicine businesses will be regulated in the city of Denver. And some common concerns from other industries are things like advertising, barriers to entry, just a whole list of items on this slide that are typical concerns for other types of industries. That doesn't mean they're the same concerns that will exist for natural medicine, of course, but just wanted to kind of get you all thinking about what types of things we might want to talk about in this group. I want to potentially go to Nico. Nico, are you still here? I think maybe he's jumped off the call. He had to jump off, so I was going to give him a chance to say his piece first, but Nico did submit some items that he wanted to share with the group. So I'm going to kick us off by just reading what Nico submitted ahead of time, and then please feel free to jump in if it sparks anything for you. If you want to add on top of it, if you want to say your own thoughts about what your priorities or questions are, please feel free. And no need to raise your hand if you feel comfortable just speaking up, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I'm happy to cue you to speak. So Nico said, here are my top questions and issues I'd like to explore through the work group. Number one is program divergence. There's currently a broad underground, I'm just reading word for word what he said, so I'm not editorializing this at all. So just pretend I'm Nico. There's currently a broad underground gray market offering psychedelic assisted therapy. Participation in the regulated program will be costly as it's funded through licensing fees and require would-be licensees to operate under rules established by the DOR, increasing their overhead. Additionally, there seems to be low risk of continuing to operate underground. What are ways that we can reduce barriers and costs to allow facilitators to bring their business into the regulated space? Number two is harm reduction and program success. Not every psilocybin journey is positive. There are bound to be adverse events that could taint the public's perception of the program's success. What can we do to reduce harm or help to mitigate risk? How can we quantify the positive impact of the program so any adverse events can be viewed within the context of the positive impact as well? And then number three is record keeping. I believe licensees should keep records for numerous reasons and will be required to keep minimal records by the state. How do we ensure licensees are able to safely and securely track and store these records while also aggregating what we learn from the program for future policy and medical applications? So that was what Nico had submitted ahead of time. Feel free to jump in, and the floor is open.
Repeat this message. Press 3.
Hey, this is Michael Briggs. So to piggyback off of the first item that Nico brought up, especially as it relates to costs, one of my primary concerns is the regulations around the location requirements. So naturally, we want to ensure safety and community comfort when it comes to locations. Things like proximity to schools and whatnot. It's important to take that into account. I think we do also need to be mindful of the impact to costs. That, of course, the more restrictions that we impose on locations, the higher leasing fees we're going to see for, as those locations become much more minimal, which of course necessarily is going to increase cost, which does generally get passed on to the consumers, which then decreases access. So I want to make sure that we're being very mindful of how the location and zoning restrictions that will be put into place are going to, down the pipeline, end up restricting access.
Via. Hi, Via Campo. So I was looking through that list of items that the Department of Excise and License sent, and I think what my recommendation to begin this conversation would be is, as people who have successfully regulated marijuana for the past 10 years, I think it's normal for all of us to look at this from this marijuana lens and standpoint. And what I'm going to challenge you all to do right now is flex your mind a little bit around this idea for the following reasons that I'm going to try to put. And I'm going to talk specifically about 4 of those items. The first one is the location requirements. To begin with, the location requirements, unlike what is in marijuana, they're statutorily provisioned 40 1,000 feet for childcare centers, preschools, schools, and childcare facilities. So those are already protected under this law. Unlike the marijuana framework, there is no retail component to the psychedelic, right? This is a therapeutic service, so it's a mental health service. So I think that by itself reduces the necessity for overarching distance restriction and location requirements. In addition to that, unlike marijuana, there's the issue of smell, which was such a big issue, especially 10 years ago when marijuana first started in the city. It doesn't exist. It's not correlated to the psychedelic world. And I think by the nature of the price of the product, of the commodity on itself, there's a lower risk on the security. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this on my second point. But I think those three components on in itself already creates a necessity for us to reevaluate and not use the marijuana framework to begin with, but start from the statutory framework, which I think is already very comprehensive. That moves me to my second point, which is the security. Related to the security, and going back to what I was saying before, the street value of this commodity is so much lower than that of marijuana when it first started. I remember, and by the way, for those who don't know this, I used to work for excise licenses. So I know how well those folks work. So one of the big concerns of the DPD was the diversion of the product because of the street value. This is a product because of the facility to consume, the facility to trade, the facility to grow, the value of the product on in itself is so much lower that I think the risks for break-ins for diversion on itself is also lower. So when we're talking about security, I think the overarching understanding that we have of marijuana, of locks, cameras, those also need to be assessed from a completely different viewpoint. In addition to that, as we were saying, this is not a retail modality. So one thing that I think throughout the conversations that have been happening in the state have been a reoccurring issue that has been brought is the issue with privacy of the patients, right? We can't have those cameras on locations where the patients are going to be treated. Therefore, the entirety of the licensed premises, this idea of the licensed premises being under surveillance is something that does not work for natural medicines. And then the third one is the cost of regulations. That's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because I think this goes really well with Nico's point, which Abby read when she first kicked off this conversation, is without the retail component, the ability for those businesses to make a profit is already going to be reduced. And therefore, we are not providing access to a psychedelic product. We're providing access to a psychedelic treatment, and that's where the business lies. So the cost of the operations should not be so stringent that we are going to either make it impossible for folks to access the treatment, nor for the providers to want this license in the first place. Which honestly, and this is a conversation that I would love to kick in for the group, brings to me this like very rebellious idea of, do we even need a license at the local level here within the existing parameters of the DOR? And then just to close on a really positive note, one thing that I think resonates really well with me. I know we've all been, banging our heads against the wall with the equity conversation for the past 3 to 4 years on the marijuana world. And I think one thing that I really appreciate is how Senate Bill 23290, which established the program, already has some of the social equity components, and how both DORA and the DOR have been establishing those equity components from the get-go, which I think will save all of us a lot of headache from having to back-end it, which happened in marijuana. So I think that's one place where it differs from marijuana in a much more positive way. Those are my comments. Sorry, I know it was very long, but I had a list.
Thank you, and please excuse my dog if you can hear him barking. Thanks so much, Bia. That was great. I saw your hand raised next. If you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted some information sharing before we started all this discussion. Being a Native American growing up in Denver, in Colorado. There are certain things about natives that some people don't take into account. There are two tribes, two reservations in the Four Corners area, Ute Mountain Ute and Southern Ute. And so when people go forward with, indigenous perspectives, they usually go and ask them, it's logical. Google finds, them there and they go to them, and they're in the Four Corners. It's about a 6-hour drive down there, not knowing that there's a big population of Native Americans in Denver. And the population that's in Denver are people who are leaving reservation lands and are coming to the city for opportunity. And so I am here to give voice to most of the people who are in Denver who aren't, affiliated with any of those two tribes down there, but they have the knowledge of our people. And just having that knowledge, we only were able to practice our religion since 1979. So there is a big trust issue with any kind of governmental system. And so, having these things forward and having these questions and having this input here is crucial, and identifying that, there are more stakeholders right outside that are in Denver that don't get represented here. And, when we're not represented and, our views and our practices are not taken into account, that makes my community, want to input. But, we're doing this right. We're coming here asking for this input, asking, that that we be heard. And so to that, it's just good to think about how we are implemented in this, especially with, the cost. Some people don't have any kind of idea of the process of what it takes of what we're doing here and setting this up. So I want to make sure that, indigenous people who have this unique perspective are able to either input, or there's like a kind of way or even a process of like, hey, you want to contribute, you want to be, at the table and, offer, your input on the traditional therapy side. I just want to make sure there's a way there and that our voice is heard, and that, all the people who are represented in Denver, which is a lot of people, a lot of tribes who aren't traditionally here or even recognized in Denver. I just want to make sure that our voice is here, and that people understand that we as Native people use natural medicine as actual medicines. And, it took us a long time to get where we are and to get this recognition. And I just wanted to highlight that for everybody moving forward. But I think everything is great, and we're asking these questions.
Thank you so much, Tom. Valeria, I saw your hand up next.
Sure. Thank you, Tom and Bia, for your remarks there. I wanted to speak to the harm reduction and risk question. I believe something was like, how do we determine if this program is successful? If not all journeys are, like beautiful and transformational, some of them can be hard. And I think relating to Tom's point, the indigenous communities know the nature of this work. And I think that's another thing that we need to reflect on, that this medicine has been advertised as like a magical pill that will solve all your problems. And maybe that's a shift that we can start to implement in this natural medicine space, where as a Western world, there is no easy fix for things, right? That we, as healing, there isn't a one and done, but it's a continuous process. And it really increases our capacity to heal and to hold both the light and the darkness. And so I think as a suggestion there, we can incorporate some of the indigenous perspectives and form a layer of education before we advertise this as like a magical pill of like, no, this is how this medicine works. And this is how you can use it as a resource for your healing, but it's not going to be a magical pill. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. Gabriela, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, thanks so much. I just want to highlight what Tom brought in and what Valeria brought in as well. Yeah, I have a lot of concerns. Our communities have a lot of concerns around this. We've been involved since the beginning of, Proposition 122. And including with some of the like real friction with some of the people in this group here who have continuously disregarded Indigenous voices, Indigenous leadership. with a real emphasis on industry. So even in this space, industry is heavily represented and private interests are heavily represented. Whereas this, right, I do equity work at a national level, at a local level. And so while there's a really strong push towards equity, and I even just hear in the framing of what you said, where we have equal voice, while in theory, that's how it should work, and equity is really complex. But in this situation, what happened was, and you mentioned that equity is being centered here, like unlike how it was in cannabis, but a more realistic equity framework that works for this is that we have to remember that they're the medicines of indigenous communities, of indigenous medicine communities. So we're not being centered here, right? We're not being uplifted here. And so it's not, hey, everyone needs to have a fair say, because the reality is that our communities have been racialized and we're still dealing with massive oppression in our communities. So I would just kind of encourage people here in this group and that are listening to learn the history, first, of where we live, learn the history of these medicines. Tom started touching a little bit on, hey, our communities were criminalized. Our communities were first criminalized for being Native and having our traditions, and then criminalized and still currently persecuted for healing with our traditional medicines. So heart to heart, it's really painful to hear about our traditions being talked here as an industry, being commercialized and talking about money. And so it's really painful for us to hear how the industry here is commodifying our traditions. So I'm here to say, please center Native voices, please uplift them. I'm here representing the needs of my communities, and we've really been harmed in the way that people have chosen to put the DORA board and the state in charge of our traditions. So I want to be mindful that I know that we need the healing. We know that we need the healing. Our elders have shared openly the medicine, but we can't heal by furthering oppressing the most impacted community. So my concerns are, if you have the industry's needs at the forefront, that you step back, because you're further oppressing us. And I know the state of Colorado, and I know the Denver, there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as genuine, legitimate DEI work, and this is not the way forward. And that's what we've been saying, that this is not the way forward. Yeah, I have a lot more to share, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. We really appreciate that. Brandon, I think your hand was next.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on a couple of things already discussed. I do share in concerns about commercialization and advertisement to the general public about these medicines. I would want to learn more about what sort of authority we would have over the ways businesses can advertise and market these services and products and medicines to the general public. Yeah, so I would want to know more about that. But one of my primary concerns is around patient safety, which I think Nico touched on, like adverse events. I think there are a lot of very basic regulations that we should talk about as far as the locations, facilities specifically. I mean, having access to water, a private bathroom. I wonder if even having access to certain medicines like Zofran for irretractable vomiting or nausea should be included as well. So, I really think trying to prevent a really catastrophic adverse event, which would be really damaging to this movement, it should be really one of our primary focuses, or at least one of my primary concerns moving forward.
Thank you. Ray, you were next.
Yeah, so my primary concern is of patient safety. And as a mycologist, I am approached by many practitioners who come across, in my opinion, would be contaminated fruit. And there is very little space for them to safely approach a mycologist or somebody who is maybe a talented citizen mycologist to be able to identify the health of that fruit and also give them the ability or the information on how to treat that person's physiology once it's been introduced to, let's say, Russifarium or Trichodermia or any other potential fungus that can be introduced to the medicine or the fruit itself. And I'm also curious as to the nature of regulating synthetic psilocybin, which is something that I've come across with other practitioners in other states. There's so little data on how the body and the neurology is interacting and introduced with synthetic psilocybin. I have a little stutter, so if you guys hear me stutter, I'm sorry. It's just the syllables. But there's so little data. And one of the things that I talk about in think tanks with other scientists, with other neurologists, with other biologists, is how do we get that data? What do we recommend to people who are practicing in the space, who are the actual end user healer? What do we tell them? Because we don't really know how that works. And I'm really curious as to how that's going to work inside of the Denver space. There have been other counties in Colorado that have chosen to go in other directions. And there has been other states such as Oregon that have, they're still figuring out how the legislation is landing in Oregon. And so I am very concerned from a mycology perspective of the health of the actual fruit that we're giving our patients and our citizens. There is regulation as far as how that's going to go through on the state level. And that regulation, as it stands right now, is from a scientific perspective, a little, it's nonlinear. Let's just call it nonlinear right now because it hasn't fleshed out. And I'm interested in how that's going to work in the Denver space.
Thank you. Tristan, I think you're next. Or I'm sorry, do you mind if I jump to Dominique really quick, just in case?
I was going to say the same.
Hey, thanks, Sue. I was going to just put down my hand because I saw in the chat that somebody had already addressed this piece, but we'll just reiterate here. Senate Bill 290 does expressly address that synthetic question where, thinking about the reference to natural medicine and how that's defined, the law does provide that it does not mean a synthetic or synthetic analog of any of those medicines listed within the scope. So just wanted to flag that piece.
Thanks, Dominique. Tristan, go ahead.
Awesome. I'm known for being a bit loquacious, so I'm going to read this verbatim. So first of all, zoning in general. So it seems reasonable to assume that a natural medicine facility may be viewed similarly to cannabis, when in reality it's much more similar to a mental health practice. Are there ways to ensure there is ample education ahead of any zoning discussions to ensure that public perception is correctly aligned with the inherent therapeutic nature of the program? And the second one, there's a lot I could say, but the second one is about economic and licensing barriers that increase costs, reduce equity, and limit patient choice. So similar to my prior statement, this should be viewed as a therapeutic practice and not a recreational establishment. As such, requirements should mirror that of other similar services associated with mental health instead of something like cannabis, alcohol, or tobacco. This will result in greater access for more diverse providers. And a subsequent benefit of this likely leads to more affordable patient access and a broader choice of providers for patients that require different types of services. I don't think I said anything different than other people have, but just voicing it again.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to follow up on something that Brandon was talking about. It's another one of my primary concerns. So as I've mentioned, I am the president of a manufacturer in Oregon. And so to kind of bring in a little bit of the perspective of what's happening in Oregon as it relates to advertising. So at the state level, they have implemented restrictions on any sort of advertising that essentially could be construed to be reasonably exposed to individuals under the age of 21. And so there is essentially the reasonable limit is any larger percentage than 30 of exposed individuals under the age of 21. What this has effectively meant is that there is no advertising of services of any kind. This has meant that access has really become an issue because businesses are not allowed to advertise effectively that they are in operation, that they provide services, that they have open spaces for appointments available. So people are really not being informed of what options are available to them when it comes to this kind of treatment. And so I think we need to think very critically around what is reasonable from an advertising perspective, and especially weigh that against what we already allow for cannabis, right? There are plenty of free magazines out there that are available in the city that advertise for cannabis businesses, that advertise for dispensaries. We already allow this quite a bit in the cannabis space. And I think, as many people have voiced before, this is a very different industry, right? There is not the recreational dispensary availability. This is much more about treatment. This is much more about working. I mean, you are required to work with a facilitator in the regulated space. So the concerns around access for individuals under the age of 21, I would say are considerably lower, considering all of the barriers put in place to prohibit access for individuals under the age of 21. So I would like us to be very contemplative about the impact of restrictions on things like advertising, again, as it relates to access to these healing services.
Thank you, Michael. Carissa?
Hi, thanks everybody who's given comment. Just want to say that I'm coming to this space as an anti-oppression DEI educator of about 10 years, a scientist, an Indigenous and environmental justice advocate, and an Iraq War veteran. And I have a couple comments. First, I understand what Michael was just saying about advertising and that being a pathway to access. But I'd also like to point out that the lack of advertising is sometimes helpful to protecting natural medicine, protecting Indigenous peoples, and protecting our land from all of this being exploited through industry. So there is advantage and disadvantage to that kind of advertising and marketing of this that protects traditional Indigenous medicines from being exploited, including our people and our lands. One comment that I had just for the facilitators of these meetings is I think that it could be helpful if we kind of categorize the comments and what people are interested in, and then if we can address those one at a time. I find myself saying, oh, I have a comment on that thing, but that's totally different than this other conversation. And I know that right now we're just trying to get out there what our concerns are, but I would be interested in having guided conversations that are focused on certain subjects and working through those so we can have thorough discussion.
Sorry, go ahead.
So as far as my interests and concerns and questions, I have these kind of two categories, but all of it is rooted in equity. I appreciate what Gabriela was saying about potential to do harm in this space. And, I just keep thinking one man's oppression is another man's get rich quick scheme. And Indigenous people have seen that repeatedly since time immemorial. And I think that is something we really need to be conscious of just because one person can benefit from this, or many people, or certain groups of people, how are we oppressing and causing harm to other communities, especially disproportionately impacted communities? I would encourage everyone to ramp up on the Colorado's Environmental Justice Act, and especially the sections on disproportionately impacted communities as we talk about zoning and as we talk about location. How I'm interested to know, how will the city be working with other agencies such as environmental agencies like the carbon management group, sorry, I can't remember the legal name there, the air quality control, and being in compliance with the Colorado's Environmental Justice Act, especially to protect the disproportionately impacted communities, such as Commerce City, where we see a lot of industry moving in there, but those industries are creating even more harm and less access to the people of those communities. Another question that I have around implementation is, how will implementation involve community oversight? It's one thing for us to have this conversation right now in the planning, but we have easily seen with other regulations how it can quickly fall apart after, because, oh, we didn't think about that, or we didn't think about that, or there are these loopholes. How will we continue to have community oversight through implementation? And really, like I said, I'm coming to this space where I am prioritizing equity, and I'm interested to know, how will we establish equitable access for licensing to already established elders, medicine workers, and shamans, particularly Indigenous elders, medicine workers, and shamans. I think it's important that we uplift here that Indigenous medicine people and Indigenous people have been benefiting and been in symbiotic relationship with natural medicines for centuries, and even in some places for millennia. So this is not new, right? Regardless of whatever the legislation or the regulations happen, we will still continue to be in that relationship and protect it from the industry, from the capital, from the people from outside of these territories moving in to benefit off of it. So I'm interested in how we can create equitable access to licensing for the people, especially Indigenous elders who have been doing this, those are the people that have trained pretty much, I would say, the vast majority of people that are trying to apply for licenses. So how do we do that? And how do we allow those already established medicine workers to then participate in the licensing and the certification of other people? And finally, how will we prioritize Indigenous peoples in general in licensing, whether that is for facilitation, cultivation, business licensing? What can we learn from cannabis, where it was quite inaccessible for some time and continues to be? And how are we going to do that by prioritizing local applicants for licensing? And not just by equitable cost, but location and the manner and everything that we are talking about with why this group is made. So those are my concerns, and I would really appreciate if we could organize everyone's kind of questions and concerns into categorical topics where we can have thorough discussion for all of those.
Thank you so much, Carissa. And you are thinking 2 steps ahead of us. So our intent with this discussion is to throw everything at the wall and get all of your ideas out there. And then Erica and I and Nicole are all furiously taking notes, and we'll go back and watch this recording and just try to capture kind of some key themes. And that's what we'll base our next meetings on, and have a more specific and guided discussion on specific topics. So I know this feels a little general and a little like just throw everything out there, but that is really what we want. We want to hear what you all want to talk about and what your concerns are. So I'm going to jump to Noah, and I just want to raise a flag for everyone that We are going to move to public comment at 3:45. Go ahead, Noah.
Thank you. The concerns that I wanted to bring up first are about keeping costs low for patients. And a good way to do that is to allow for licensed extraction facilities and manufacturing. That way, cultivators and manufacturers are able to use all parts of the mushroom, the waste and the trim that would be thrown away if otherwise not put in through extraction and made into usable products. Extracted products, you're also able to isolate and reformulate, and that helps control the duration of the experience, which could shorten the session times, which will greatly lower the costs. The other main concern that I have kind of piggybacks on what Carissa was saying, and I think that it's really important that Indigenous people that are going to go through a licensed route, that there's a way for the public to recognize who is actually associated with federally recognized American tribes, Indigenous people, or religions, so that those types of facilities are actually, truly represented by people, from those tribes. Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. I'm going to go to Kevin next, just because we haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you. So first of all, I deeply resonate with everything that's been shared so far on this call. I do want to remind all of our participants that a lot of the regulatory frameworks in terms of licensing, specifically around cultivation, around testing facilities, around facilitator licensing, healing centers, are really going to be decided by the state. And I think to the greatest extent possible, it should be the duty of this work group and the City and County of Denver to reduce the regulatory burden as much as possible for Denver residents and individuals who are looking at either becoming licensed in the City and County of Denver, whether as a facilitator or as a healing center operator, et cetera. And most of the things that come to mind for me really are around accessibility. And so if we're talking about accessibility, how are we making licensing accessible here in the city? And how are we making services for participants accessible, especially for those who honestly may not be able to potentially afford the services? Because if we're being honest, and we're looking at Oregon as the only other state that's implemented this kind of a program, access to services can be pricey and frankly is out of reach for a lot of people. So I think one of my biggest questions or concerns is, what can the city do to actually incentivize participation, especially for marginalized communities, especially for communities that are disproportionately impacted by various factors? And throwing something out here, maybe that looks like a grant program for folks to be able to access these services. Maybe that looks like a grant program that prioritizes licensing for healing centers for various communities that may not be able to afford it. So just to wrap this up, I think accessibility really is the primary issue here, and cost. And then going along with that, what is the city doing to really prioritize education on this issue for just Denver residents in general, so that members of the public are, fully aware, as other folks have mentioned, that this is not like recreational cannabis. This is very much like a therapeutic program. And how does that factor into things when we're discussing, zoning and the location of healing centers, et cetera? Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Marcy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. That was really wonderful. You say that, and I have to back on those comments about having a program available like a grant. There are a lot of patients that will not have access if it's cost prohibitive. And of course, we know in Oregon, not only is it cost prohibitive, even though it is for many people, there's still a very long wait list, up to a year. A lot of patients and different patient populations may not have a year to get that access. Many patients may not be able to, again, as I mentioned in my opening, they may not be able to physically get to a facility. So we have to maybe include something that will allow these homebound patients, populations, maybe they're suffering from PTSD and just don't even get out in the community. Maybe they are homebound, unable to, just physically unable to get out. What kind of exceptions are we going to make so that they can get access? And again, in hearing all the conversation, we really do have to figure out a way to allow for licensing for Indigenous peoples to be able to have these licenses. And, maybe there's a different scale to look at and to allow us to, if we're going to have a limit on the number of facilities that are going forward, but we do have to make sure that these people are allowed to serve this medication in a way that they are meant. And that's.
Thank you, Marcy. We'll go to Bia next.
Yeah, my comment's super quick because it's procedural. I'm a sucker for a good process. Years ago, the MED used this like Google Jamboard collaborative whiteboard on some of their work groups, which I thought worked out like phenomenally. Because I loved everything that Carissa was saying, and I fully support. And there were other comments that throughout resonated with me, but unlike Erica and Abby, I'm not gonna rewatch this video. So I feel like a lot of it is gonna get lost. So having that visual of people's concerns and then following on, piggyback on Carissa was saying, being able to trickle down from there, I think would be very valuable for this group.
Thanks, Bia. Dale?
Thanks for the discussion. There's certainly many issues that are coming up for me in terms of health equity and credentialing and access issues, patient safety. Many of these things will be or are being worked on at the state level, and so I'll just comment on something that may be more local at the moment. I think the discussion of zoning is pertinent. One thing that I would like to see not happen is, for example, a community mental health center or community mental health organization locally, or a primary care clinic locally, hospital system that is serving an underserved community. I would hate for them to try to pursue some of these processes and get licensed to provide an advanced therapy, like an advanced mental health therapy to these patients, and then be denied because of a zoning issue at an existing, clinic or existing establishment that's already serving the community that perhaps is trying to be targeted. And so I think that's one issue. Yeah, another issue that's sort of adjacent to some of the discussion here is regarding industry and sort of an exploitative feel, I would say. Many healthcare providers, I'll say, may want to get training in some of this space. And there are certainly many organizations or companies out there that are providing training that is cost prohibitive to a lot of people. And that certainly creates an equity issue. So that's just something to be thinking about going forward as well.
Thank you, Dale. And Michael, did you want to do a last comment before we move on to public comment?
Sure, I'll keep it quick. I just wanted to follow up on Marcy's comment and to kind of put a fine point on what she was talking about when it comes to long wait lists. So this is largely due to the impact of advertising restrictions, as I was talking about before. You have some service centers that have become relatively well known that do have wait lists that are 6 months to a year. We also just had in Oregon the first service center that closed because they were only in operation for 6 months and did not receive enough individuals coming in for service. And with no ability essentially or effectively to advertise, they weren't able to advertise that they had open spots, that they were available for people to come in and access their services. So there is a significant impact to things like restrictions around advertising that, again, I want to make sure that we take into account.
Thanks, Michael. And thank you all so much for such a robust discussion. It was really fascinating. And like Erica put in the chat, we're definitely going to take those suggestions about the structures of, these discussions and incorporate them into our materials for the next meeting. I do want to make sure we have time for any members of the public who would like to comment. And then once we get through public comment, we can certainly continue this discussion up until 4 o'clock. So I'm just going to jump to any attendees of the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment, please, you can click on the raise hand button that's at the bottom of your Zoom window. Excuse me. And I will enable you to speak, so you'll be able to unmute yourself. And then please do try to limit your comments to about 2 minutes, just so we can get to as many people as possible. And then if you don't have a chance to make a public comment today, or if you would feel more comfortable making a written comment, you can email those written comments to exlpolicy@denvergov.org. So the first hand I saw was Lloyd Cuppins. Lloyd, I'm going to allow you to speak. And you might have to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Abby. And thanks to the working group. So much of this, as we've noted before, comes down to sort of what have we done before that's worked? What are we doing as Denver, progenitor of a lot of good things regarding the rollout for cannabis, 10, 11, 12 years ago. But many people do, again, say we want good public policy. We just don't want to lean on some of the things that either have nothing to do with psychedelics and the administration within the city. My particular comment comes back to buffers and zoning. And I go back to 2017, 2018, when we tried to form some rules in Denver for consumption clubs, for spas, for adult centers that would be able to host responsible enjoyment of different cannabis products. And in that process, we came up with what I think is a few arbitrary things that have kept 9 out of 10 potential consumption club licensees from even opening. So here, after 5, 6 years, we have the coffee joint, and we have a lot of people who have spent a lot of money to not open consumption clubs. And part of that was this 1,000-foot rule that was incorporated all the way back from the beginning. That 1,000-foot rule said you could not have a consumption club near a school, near a city-owned public property, for instance, open swimming pools, recreation centers owned by the city. We have a 1,000-foot rule for childcare centers. We have a 1,000-foot buffer for alcohol and drug treatment centers. And in the case of Las Vegas, they proposed and then dropped church and synagogues. But the city of Las Vegas is able to now license over, I think, 29 social consumption clubs because they dropped those buffers from 1,000 feet to 500 feet. So my point in the psychedelic healing center space is very simple. We have to very carefully look at the map that was provided that showed when all of these buffers, all of these setbacks were taken into consideration, we just didn't have very many places in the city that would be conducive to folks going to a club. Now, if you want to open...
Thank you, Lloyd. That is 2 minutes. Sorry, I know it goes fast, but in the interest of making sure everyone gets a chance, we're going to move to the next person. Please, if you do have more comments, like Abby said, please send them to us in email.
Okay, next hand up is Anna. Anna?
Yeah, thank you. I have a few things to say, but I'm going to keep it very short because I think it's very important to highlight. A lot of people have been mentioning the importance of education in the space, and I'd like to differentiate between psychedelics and natural medicines, which the natural medicines, as Carissa and Gabby and Tom mentioned, have been part of the indigenous communities for time immemorial. And when it comes to education, I would love to highlight the fact that the education needs to be centered around the indigenous people that have been communing with these plant teachers for a very, very, very long time. And it would be very sad to see people that are just learning about these medicines in the past decade or 2 decades be the ones providing the education for these plant teachers that are not to be commodified, because to us, they are our kin, they are our siblings, they are spirits. They're not just something to be extracted from. So I'd love to center the education on the people that actually know about these plant teachers.
Thank you. Next person is Lizette.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for the working group. I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, this is new territory for government. This is not new territory for Indigenous people. I am an Indigenous person, and I've been working with plant medicines for a long time. I would also like to propose that you guys have some transparency on the choosing of the members of this group, this working group, and give us a percentage of the diversity and how the decisions will be made. I am also not in agreement with out-of-state residents that are part of this group. And I also want to make a comment about the corporations and distraction piece. I see a lot of companies being just salivating at the opportunity of extraction and the use. And by use, I mean the full meaning of the word, the use of sentient beings. Nobody likes to be used in this country or in this life. And you guys are talking about using sentient beings. Also, I support Anna on the education of Indigenous. The education being driven by Indigenous people. These are people that have worked with these plant medicines for a long time, and also make the distinction between plant medicines and psychedelic made in laboratories. The education needs to come from the Indigenous people, the people that actually have those traditions and that knowledge and wisdom. I see MAPS mentioned a lot. MAP has a number of problems, and I would like to know why some decisions and some regulations are being driven by them. And also, I want to talk about the harm reduction and the response and how first responders are going to be trained about this. We all know about what happened with ketamine in Aurora, and that's also psychedelic, that they already had use of them, and we saw what happened with the death of Elijah McCain. And I also want to bring attention that, we're talking about therapeutics for healing, and we are healing from the system, the oppression that the system gives us. And it is ridiculous to think that we can heal from a system that is not changed. So what are we doing to change the system in order to provide that healing, and how that is going to get rooted? Because we cannot just continue to talk about how certain things are going to heal you without actually looking at the root of the problem. And I think that this group is going to have to look at those things and figure out a way of working around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizette.
All right, next is Dr. Beers.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've got a couple of things I want to touch upon here. First of all, I was pretty surprised about how fast this board came together, and also have the concerns about the diversity and equity built into this board itself. As a licensed psychologist and an Indigenous community member, I have concerns that are in different areas. And the first area is, we are talking about mental health here, and I don't really know what the credentials are on this board, but from what I've gathered, there aren't very many people on here that have practiced mental health, have experienced the pitfalls in mental health, as well as related to natural medicines. So inherently, the board's at a disadvantage for that. Regarding what is being done about this education piece, not just with the public, but with the board, the cultural education, spiritual education of the members on this board, to bring you up to speed, so that way we don't have to call in and do a 2-minute education piece at the end of each meeting. What is being done regarding the youth engagement? There are laws that say that the youth can engage Youth have always engaged in Indigenous cultures. Youth have always experimented, and those will be issues that need to be dealt with. And the other piece is, what are you going to do about protecting clinicians who don't want a license, who want to stay outside of this frame, but somehow this work crosses paths with them, like it does already in harm reductive perspective. So those are the things I have for now. I have many more, but thank you for the time.
Thank you. Justin?
Hello. How's everybody today? Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes.
My concern is with, I've heard a lot of talk about Indigenous people. I think that can be handled with a handbook that's given out to everybody in the area and just maybe in the whole state, or anything that's explaining their uses and their cultures and things. It can be tackled that way, and so that everybody feels included and that they're, protected. On the next thing, I think my concern is that how they're going to protect people on, excuse me, when you go to a different dimension and people can be taken advantage of. So how are people going to be regulated, and, even if they're cured and been through these state regulations, no one like that's going to be able to get a license, right? I mean, it's going to be very strict. It's not just going to be Joe Schmo saying, I know this, I know that, because there can be so many things that can happen with that. I mean, especially when you get to the DMT, because you start getting into intramuscular, intravenous, so many things. But I'm gonna leave it at that. My concerns are more with people's protection and sexual things that could happen at these doctors if there's not more than one person. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, I believe that concludes public comment. I'm not seeing any new hands. Want to go over just some next steps. So our next 3 meetings are at the last Thursday of each month, or the 4th Thursday of each month. So our next meeting will be Thursday, April 25th from 2 to 4. We'll send out some information ahead of time so that you all have time to prepare, but we're going to take all this information back that you have shared with us and really use it to develop our agendas for future meetings. So we appreciate you all coming prepared and being willing to be open and share all of your knowledge with us, and we're excited to keep learning from you. So this recording and the slides from this meeting will be posted on our website. denvergov.org/natural medicine is the place to go. That's the landing page for all of this work that we'll be doing here. And then for you all, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns or just suggestions for our next meeting. Or feel free to email exlpolicy@denvergov.org. That's just our policy inbox that Erica and I monitor. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Any other closing thoughts, Erica or Molly?
Just want to express so much gratitude for everyone. I know that it can be hard and challenging to hear differing viewpoints, and we welcome that. And I know that makes it a tricky space, but we do really, really appreciate you all, like Abby said, coming prepared, ready to have these hard conversations and ready to share with us all the things that we could never have enough time to learn that you all bring to the table. So thank you.
Okay, and with that, we will close today's webinar. Thank you all so much and have a great weekend.